An indie favorite has just dropped a new album that's caught a lot of people's ears. Let's find out if all the hubbub is worth all the hubbub. Hi everyone, I'm Paul Crayson and you're watching Music Mentions. Today I'm doing a deep dive review of Vampire Weekend's new release, Only God Was Above Us. Settle in and relax a bit as I chew into this album. Unlike most YouTube reviewers, I'm going to give you a little more in-depth and contextual review. This means I'm going to tell you a little bit about the band. I'll cover some of the album release notes, the track listing, and the song lengths. I'm going to go over the album title and the cover art, discuss some general album observations. Then I'm going to dig into the individual tunes and wrap up with my overall thoughts and an album rating. Who are Vampire Weekend? Well, this is a very American band that started in New York City back in 2006 while members were attending Columbia University. The band's name comes from the name of an abandoned film project inspired by the movie Lost Boys that Ezra Koenig, the band's frontman, had worked on while attending university. The band started touring as a support act in 2007, including a support slot for the Shins, and a big buzz was generated online before they even released their debut album. The self-titled and self-produced debut was released in January of 2008, and critics just fawned over it. However, there was also some backlash to all of the hype, as some critics faulted the band for being white, privileged Ivy League grads in boat shoes appropriating foreign influences. This upper crust privilege was really not the case, as the members had jobs during university and had scholarships and student loans in order to attend Columbia. They became one of the most notable bands of 2008 and subsequently released an additional 3 highly regarded albums over the coming years called Contra, Modern Vampires of the City, and Father of the Bride, the last being released pre-pandemic in 2019. Their sound has been variously described as indie pop, baroque pop, art pop, and indie rock. Let's see who the current members are. We have Ezra Koenig. He's 40 years old and the band's main songwriter and guitarist. He also plays a lot of keyboards on this album. Ezra has been very busy over the years outside of Vampire Weekend, having co-written and produced albums for other artists such as Beyonce and Liam Gallagher, as well as even writing and producing an animated series called Neo Yokio that was aired by Netflix. Next we have Chris Baio. He is 39 years old and is the band's bassist. On this album, he plays bass on several songs and is credited as an engineer on all of them. He's released 3 solo albums, and if you're curious, yes, he's related to the actor Scott Baio, as Chris is the Happy Days actor's first cousin once removed. Then we have Chris Thompson. He is 40 years old and is the band's drummer. On this album, he plays the drums on several tunes and co-produced one of them. He also released a solo album back in 2017 under the pseudonym Dams of the West. There are many additional musicians that contributed to this new record, including an orchestra and a choir. I won't go through all of them, but I will note one here. Ariel Rekscheid. He is all over Only God Was Above Us as a producer, recording engineer, bassist, guitarist, keyboardist, and several other roles. He's worked with Vampire Weekend on their previous 2 releases. He was also notably the producer of the huge 2006 hit Hey There Delilah by Plain White T's. Now for some release notes. The album was released on April 5th, 2024, and is Vampire Weekend's 5th full release of original studio material. It was released on Columbia Records and was mostly produced by Ariel and Ezra. Now, one song was produced by Chris Thompson and another co-produced by former founding member Rostam Batmanglij, who still collaborates with the band, although he officially left in 2016 to pursue solo projects. The album was mixed by Dave Friedman. The mastering was done by Emily Lazar. There were 3 singles released prior to the album release. Now let's shift over to the track listing and the lengths. There are only 10 songs on this record. Ice Cream Piano is the shortest song at 3 minutes and 36 seconds. Hope is the longest at 7 minutes and 57 seconds. And the total album length is just over 47 minutes. Now let's dive into the album title and the cover. The album title is Only God Was Above Us. This came from the title of a 1988 news article in the New York Daily News about a structural failure during an Aloha Airlines flight where the plane's roof was torn off. A woman that survived the flight was quoted in the article as saying, "I looked up. Only God was above us." The cover is a photograph by Steven Seagal. It was taken in a subway graveyard in New Jersey in 1988. According to Ezra, this photo was not edited in any way and there was no Photoshop used. The subway car was tilted on its side and Seagal had a couple of his friends pose in the car. So it appears the guy holding the newspaper with the Aloha Airlines article was lying on his back while the guy in the background was standing upright. The photo was then tilted to make it appear that the second guy was defying gravity and the newspaper guy was sitting upright. A very cool effect. Well, Ezra fell in love with this photo and Seagal's work so much that he decided not to put the band's logo anywhere on the cover. Since much of the album's content is related to New York City, the cover is quite appropriate to the thematic feel of the record. It's a pretty cool and memorable album cover. Now for some general album observations. The recording quality here is top-notch and what you'd expect from this band at this stage in their career. There is a lot going on instrumentally throughout this record with instruments and sounds and textures mixing to create an overall interesting, if not a little busy, soundscape. It's a good album for headphone listening. The vibe of this record is a bit hard to describe. If you've listened to Vampire Weekend before, then you understand their general sound. I wouldn't, however, really describe this as a rock record. It has some rock elements for sure, as well as some angular and sharp sonic edges, but overall, I get more of a classical and Baroque feel more than anything else. Sometimes it sounds like music that would have fit seamlessly over those classic Warner Brothers cartoons from decades ago. Now let's get into those individual songs. The first song is called Ice Cream Piano. This kickoff track is the shortest at just over 3.5 minutes, but it's also the most frenetic and energetic track. It starts very softly with some distorted guitar in the background and some acoustic guitar and piano as Ezra sings in an almost Thom Yorke style, the jarring line, "Fuck the world, you said it quiet." After the first verse, a little more than a minute in, the song explodes and we're on our way. What sounds like horns played on a synth really punch, and the drumming is a furious double-time pattern. A buzzy distortion is faded in and out, and the third verse sounds like a little more straight-ahead tune, but it's still propulsive. There's also an instrumental break with the string section letting loose. The outro starts quiet, like the start of the tune before exploding at the end. Here are the second verse's lyrics. "The word was weaponized as soon as it had passed your lips. I am a gentleman, I refuse to show my gentleness. Fuck around and find out, the angry child recites this every day. The universe will pry out the truth, which is you've got nothing to say." I read this song's lyrical theme as being about America's internal political conflict that never stops, although it ebbs and flows throughout history. There's never true peace to be had. By the way, the phrase "fuck around and find out," or just FAFO, is the opposite of the phrase "don't tread on me." FAFO was adopted by left-wing folks in 2020 as a warning to the right that re-electing Trump would have unwanted consequences. This track is frenetic and schizophrenic with its wild dynamic swings, but Ezra manages to make it work with great melodic lines. Song number 2 is classical. This was the second single. We settled down just a tad with this really melodic song. Ezra's vocals sound great on the verses when the busy instrumentation quiets down. There's a repeating melodic line that indeed sounds like a happy, little fast waltzy classical piece of music. There's also what's almost sounds like a loud guitar slide figure that adds a jarring element. And then we have an instrumental section that decides it wants to be jazz with some John Coltrane-inspired saxophone. Snippets of sound effects jump in and out when the song really gets going. Let's take a peek at the pre-chorus and the chorus. Untrue, unkind, and unnatural, how the cruel with time becomes classical. I know that walls fall, shacks shake, bridges burn, and bodies break. It's clear something's gonna change. And when it does, which classical remains? This song is about how history is written by the victors, who are often the most violent and cruel. Then, with time, we consider the victors to be classical within history. Of course, the term classic here can also apply to the classical elements within the song, mainly that repeating melodic line I mentioned. This is a memorable and earwormy tune. Not very rock and roll, but then again, I don't think Vampire Weekend wants to be rock and roll. It's one of the stronger songs on this album. Song number 3 is Capricorn. This was the first single, and it reduces the tempo and energy of the previous 2 songs into a nice mid-tempo piece, at least at the beginning before loud screechy sounds paint across the soundscape. The drums are thick and heavy. As the song approaches the quiet outro, the boys at the mixing board decide to slowly turn up the levels so that they clip with distortion. The melody here is great again, and Ezra sounds good singing in an almost resigned fashion. Here are the chorus's lyrics. Capricorn, the year that you were born, finished fast, and the next one wasn't yours. Too old for dying young, too young to live alone, sifting through centuries for moments of your own. This song's theme appears to be about people born at the end of the year under the astrological sign of Capricorn and how they barely get to live within their birth year as the new year is immediately around the corner. Now, I never really considered this before, but it's a pretty cool topic for a song. This is one of my favorites. It's super melodic and sticky. The screechy sounds and the over-distortion at the end seem to be tagged on to make the song more edgy or modern. But even with these annoyances, the song that's underneath the noise is a great one. Song number 4 is called Connect. This one is pretty interesting. It's a super bass-heavy track with what sounds like a bouncy stand-up bass taking pole position for most of the song. The other featured instrument is the piano, played in a very classical style again. It's the first song we've run into so far that has some appreciable space to it. The other notable thing is that the chorus is highly unusual, sung with a staccato pacing emphasizing every word. Each word is emphasized with a deep synth note. Very unusual. Ezra's vocals are relaxed and placed forward in the mix, and the vocal melody is memorable in a weird way. The last third of the song employs a left-right channel shifting phaser effect. Then the outro, which lasts a few seconds, becomes thick with instrumentation and a musical flourish. Let's look at the lyrics from the first verse. The memories don't fade, surprising fate for days. You elegantly wasted before you lost your spark. Took acid in the park while living in a basement. Ezra has described this tune as psychedelic Gershwin. It seems that it's about an acid trip in New York City. There's a disjointedness and trippiness to the lyrics, which the music seems to mirror. By the way, the phrase elegantly wasted could be a nod to the old INXS hit of the same name. Now, this is a bizarre tune. At times, it seems a bit cartoonish. Do I like it? Yeah, but in a weird way. I'm more intrigued by it than anything else. Like, what the hell is this? Let me listen to it again. Song number 5 is Prep School Gangsters. We get back to more traditional song structure here. The start sounds like the classic Cars song Best Friend's Girl. There are several instrumental interludes between verses in this one where the featured instrument is a happy and clean sounding guitar playing a figure that sounds like old Vampire Weekend. The instrumentation is more spare than the previous tunes, and once again, the melody is very memorable. We even get some scratchy cello at the end. Let's peek at the third verse, lyrics. I was only walking by, didn't mean to catch your eye. It's just something people say. You could lose some teeth that way. The song title comes from a New York article of the same name that describes how waspy, privileged school kids would ingratiate themselves with poor drug dealer kids as a way to be cool or rebellious. The song also seems to say that somewhere in the privileged kid's family tree, generations back, their ancestors were like the poor kids. Interesting topic for a song. This is a more traditional poppy Vampire Weekend song and a nice grounding after the weirdness that was Connect. It's a light, summery type of tune. Song number 6 is called The Surfer. Things chill out with this almost melancholy track. Most of the songs on this album are in a happy major key, but we get a minor key here, at least during the verses. The song seems to float along somewhat like a surfer on a slow-moving wave. The song starts with a simple drum beat and a bass line, while a piano playing sparingly in the very uppermost keys. Ezra's singing is laid back and patiently melodic. Strings become prominent halfway through, along with some touches of horns. Let's look at the chorus lyrics. Outside the confines of a super mini's door, there's a California king placed directly on the floor. Oh, the surfer can't forget the shells around his neck, but you were born beneath fluorescent lights. You've never seen a starry night, you saint. Another New York City themed song, it appears to speak, in part, to living in the city away from the benefits of nature while pursuing dreams that are not likely to come true. I really like the lyrics on this one, like the image here of a king mattress on the ground outside a mini market store. This is the tune on the album that was collaborated on and produced with Rostam, their old founding member. It definitely has a different feel and is just a beautifully executed piece of work. This one is one of my favorites. Song number 7 is called Gen X Cops. This more upbeat song starts with some loud, jolting, processed guitar notes and slides to make sure that we're awake. Then the song settles into its own groove with Ezra's vocals sounding drenched in reverb. We get a little delicate piano run again during an instrumental break. There are a lot of dynamics as the tune seems to throw instruments at us, pull them back, and then throw them again at us. The melody, as usual, is a highlight. Now let's take a look at the second verse. Dodge the draft, but can't dodge the war. Forever cursed to live insecure. The curtain drops, a gang of Gen X cops assembles, trembling before our human nature. This tune lyrically appears to be quite topical and relevant. It's about generational differences, specifically between Gen X and millennials. Millennials have been on the receiving end of things like homelessness and the inability to afford housing. I dig this track, especially the melodies. These guys know how to write the bones of songs with great melodies. I'm not so sure about the jarring guitar sections, as they seem a bit out of place, but this song is also one of the better ones. Song number 8 is Mary Boone. This was the third single. Now here we start off a bit quiet with a choir chanting in the background while a piano gently plays and Ezra sings very softly in this higher than normal register. The quieter verses are separated by what sounds like a loud drum loop, almost hip-hop-like. Midway, we get piano runs again. The song is again very dynamic, seemingly stitched together in pieces. The choir takes over one of the choruses, which is an interesting touch. Let's look at the second verse. Crooked crime, petty cop, not on the street yet, but it was cooking. In those days, the burning days, the one from Queens, not from Brooklyn. This song is about a notorious New York City art dealer from the 1980s named Mary Boone, whose business was fraudulent. To me, this song is about someone with ambitions who comes to the big city to be successful and succumbs to the pressure and greed. I like the sections with the hip-hop-like drums and the lyrics are strong. Otherwise, this track doesn't do much for me as I find the choir a bit annoying. Song number 9 is Pravda. This starts with an almost classical sounding guitar figure that is very Vampire Weekend. It's a little bit more laid back and just a little less schizophrenic of a track. Ezra's vocals are good and the melodies are solid. Although the song is one of the quieter ones, there's still a lot of stuff thrown into the mix, especially towards the end with these washes of synths. Let's look at some of the lyrics from verse 2. Your Uncle Henry lived in Moscow. Your Aunt Ludmilla lived there too. Irina grew up in Wisconsin. I'm leaving at the rising of the moon. The lyrical theme seems to be about going to and coming from Russia. Pravda is the Russian word for truth. In these lyrics, the track is specifically referencing a family that moved from Moscow to Wisconsin. Again, the strong point for me about this track is the song Within, the melodies and the lyrics that the instrumentation hangs on. It's a solid track. Song number 10 is Hope. The closing track is the longest Vampire Weekend have ever released at just about 8 minutes. We get the classical piano runs again and instruments and sounds that dip in and out, although here they seem a little more appropriate and a little less jarring. There's a repeating line of I hope you let it go that really works in the context of this song. This is a very melodic tune and a bit of a think piece. The song ends with a build-up of sound and then quietly fades out with the central piano figure. Here's the 5th verse. The sentencing was overturned. The killer freed. The court adjourned. A hope betrayed. A lesson learned. I hope you let it go. I did the things you asked me to. I testified what wasn't true. But now I lost my faith in you. I hope you let it go. My interpretation is that this is the most political track on the album that points out some of the weaknesses of America. For example, here a killer is freed and the hope for justice is betrayed. Ezra appears to be wishing that America lets go of some of its faults. Ultimately, it's a song of hope, but one without real hope that things will get better. This may be my favorite song on the album. Even at its exaggerated length, it doesn't really get old. The melody is super strong and the instruments don't jolt you out of the moment as much. So what do I think about Only God Was Above Us? Let me just say that upon my first couple of listens, it didn't really do much for me. I'm more of a rock and distorted guitar guy, and the classical elements of this record didn't really impress me. Frankly, I find scalar piano runs somewhat boring. However, I never review an album that I don't play at least 10 to 15 times first. And sure enough, this one slowly sunk its teeth into my old man's brain. The strength of this album is the underlying songwriting. The progressions and melodies are wonderful. I slowly found myself humming or singing along with the songs. Then I caught myself humming and singing various phrases at random times when I wasn't listening to the album. That's usually a good sign. And the lyrical themes are big and philosophical, but really well executed. However, something also didn't sit quite right with me, and it's this. Much of the album sounds like it was Frankensteined together in the studio by musicians trying to be edgy or clever just for the sake of it. There is such a thing as overcooking a delicious meal. Some of the instrument punch-ins, effects, and sonic flourishes call too much attention to themselves and pull the listener out of the song, like an overconfident chef throwing in ingredients that don't quite meld with the overall flavor. This isn't to say that this isn't a good album. It is. It's a very good album. but much of it is buried beneath layers of sonic pretension. In my opinion, the songs would have been served better with less time in the studio and a more traditional recording approach. So who's this album for? If you're a straight-ahead rocker, you can probably just skip this one. This is not a rock record. It's a twee classical prog pop record. It's the type of record designed to satisfy overthinking music critics. In other words, it's perfect for the folks at Pitchfork. However, if you dig Vampire Weekend or are a little more adventurous and have the patience to let the underlying songs reveal themselves, there are many rewards to be had. With all that said, for me, the positives solidly outweigh the negatives, so I'm giving this album a rating of 7.5 out of 10. Now, your mileage may vary, guys. You know the drill. Let me know what you guys think of this album down in the comments below. Did you love this like a lot of reviewers have loved this? Or does it just not do much for you? I'd love to hear from people that don't really listen to Vampire Weekend. Maybe you've never heard of this band before. I would love to know what you guys think about this album. Anyway, as usual, guys, thank you. Really appreciate you guys taking the time out and watching my reviews and my videos. If you would, please just hit that like button, hit the subscribe and the notifications. I'm going to catch you cats on the flip side.